We need more entrepreneurship in all organizations. Increasing speed of change and complexity forces leaders to be more proactive, agile and collaborative. The answer is to strengthen the entrepreneurial leaders and create a culture supportive to them. Risto, welcome to our video series about entrepreneurship. Thinking of entrepreneurship, we know it's important. How would you describe yourself as an entrepreneur?
Well, I actually think that I brainwashed myself to become an entrepreneur or assume the values of entrepreneurship when I was between the ages of 7 and 12 by reading hundreds and hundreds of young boys' books or teenage boys' books, adventure books, yes. Where typically the young boy hides in a ship in the Liverpool harbour in the 18th century, yep. And is found from the lifeboat a day after the ship has left port and is put washing the deck, and then grows up there and gets more responsibility, and then there are wars and pirates and stuff, and there's a bad leader somewhere on the ship and there's a mutiny, and then the boy becomes the captain and he leads from the front and he's courageous and he helps the weak and he opens the doors to the women, and when you read 200 such stories you sort of brainwash yourself. And those are all entrepreneurial qualities in my book. So that's how I became an entrepreneur, and then the rest was sort of automatic.
Okay.
Computers appeared, I wanted to get one, I needed money, my parents didn't have enough and they didn't want to give it to me, what they had better use for it, so I had to go and work to get some money, and from the age of 11 I have been working sort of at least every summer, but from the age of 15 also around the year on top of going to school.
Sounds very familiar, as a matter of fact. In your book, you talk a lot about entrepreneurial leadership. How would you describe an entrepreneurial leader in context of a big company?
Well, I don't think the context matters that much. There's an interesting story of a guy called Napoleon Hill in the 1920s or 1910s, when he, according to the story, I don't know if it's true, he wanted to find out what is common between the best entrepreneurs in the world. And he went to meet the world's richest man, who was Andrew Carnegie. And he asked Mr. Carnegie if he would be willing to help him find out what unites the best entrepreneurs. And if he could write letters of introduction for him to get to meet the Rockefellers and DuPonts and Edisons and so forth.
Of the time, yeah.
And according to the story, Mr. Carnegie asked him, are you ready to spend the next 20 years of your life trying to find the answer? And Napoleon Hill said yes. And he went and met with 500, according to the story, of the top entrepreneurs. And then he came back saying that now I know what is common between these people. There are three things that they all share. The first one is that they have a vision, they have a plan, something they want to achieve, some problem they want to fix. And they have unyielding faith in their ability to go there, be that, do that. And then they do something every day. They do things every day. And it's not an entrepreneurial recipe, but it's a recipe for success.
Right.
You know what you want to do. You believe so strongly in your ability to do it that everybody else believes in you as well. And then you just do things every single day. And of course, your plans change, the environment changes, you learn on the way, but the recipe stays the same. Your vision may change a little bit, the faith doesn't change at all, and you continue doing stuff every day. And the way you do that in my books is something that I call paranoid optimism, where especially today when the world is both unpredictable and very, very complicated, i.e. in combination it's a complex world. You can't create just a single plan and assume that this is what I will be implementing. You actually have to do a mental trip along a number of paths into the future that you want to happen. You also need to ask yourself, why and how could I fail? And then you can look at those different futures or scenarios and think about how can I influence the parameters of these scenarios so that the undesirable scenarios will become less likely by taking action every day. And the desirable scenarios will become more likely by taking action every day. And over time, you reshape the probability curve of the future to be closer to what you want.
So you have a mission and then you create different real options and paths, which you cultivate the best ones. You also say about the entrepreneurial leadership that it's necessary for everybody, each person, even in a big corporation. Can you elaborate that?
Yeah, one of the key criteria, but perhaps it's also an outcome of doing what I described before, is that you feel accountable. When you have that dream, which you believe so strongly, and you want to do things, you have to do things every day, you feel accountable. You feel a sense of ownership for the whole organization. Everybody does things every day to further the cause. We learn every day. You can't feel responsible for only a tiny box that is your job description. You feel responsibility for everything that is being done to fulfill the vision.
The whole, yes.
And when you feel that accountability, you care in a different way for the company's failures, shortcomings, bad customer service, the people who do the hard work and nobody ever says thank you. You suddenly start caring in a different way. And that you can do in large companies and in small companies. You can, and actually I believe that people deserve to find an environment, a culture, a company where they can feel that sense of ownership and that sense of accountability. Because if you don't, your job is just something that you have to do in order to get the money to do something that you really want to do.
But this is very interesting because listening to you, I can't think how an entrepreneur could not be accountable. Mm-hmm. One could get away in a big company, depending on the culture, even as a fairly senior manager, by working your box, especially if you're in a function or something. Mm-hmm. But as an entrepreneur, you can't even separate.
And that's exactly my point, that the entrepreneurship in a way is that feeling of accountability. An entrepreneur is given that sense of accountability and ownership. Because when you start the company, you hire all the employees, of course you feel responsible. But in a large company it's much tougher to feel that sense of ownership and accountability. And therefore it's harder to be entrepreneurial in a large company. But you can do that.
Why it is harder?
And I have compared this in a perhaps a bit naive way to washing cars. And if you rent a car, regardless of what the weather is like, you are unlikely to wash it before you return it. If it's your own car, you tend to wash it once in a while. And it's the sense of ownership that differentiates these two situations. With a rental car, you feel that it's not mine. Why would I wash it? I will anyway be bringing it back to the shop in a few days' time. And it's their car. Let them wash it. I'll rather drive in a dirty car. But when it's your own car, you think differently. And I think it's a much nicer feeling when you think of your own job as the car that you own. Then you have that sense of ownership. It's a sense of fulfillment as well. Your work has more meaning to you, and we all deserve to have meaningful work. So this is also something that is in the interest of the individual, not just the organization that aims to, hey, let's bring a sense of entrepreneurship into the organization. People will work harder, they will work longer, they will do better work. But actually it's helping those people in their search for fulfillment.
Purpose.
It is purpose for their lives, but of course one way to create this sense of ownership and accountability and entrepreneurship is to share a purpose with the company, so that the company's purpose fits with your own values and aims in life, your own purpose. Then you sort of automatically get a little bit of sense of accountability and ownership. Which means that a large organization that wants to spread an entrepreneurial culture needs to think about their purpose, and then needs to recruit people for whom that purpose is a core value already.
Valid, yes. And this sounds very much like what Larry Fink wrote last year in the Sense of Purpose letter, which I thought very interesting statement overall. But how can we, apart from recruitment, and of course recruitment is a major tool in selecting the people, what else can we do in a large organization to foster and cultivate a culture of the ownership and then the other traits that the entrepreneurs have? What can we do?
Well, it starts with defining sort of the practices that we want to see from our own employees. How do we want us to behave? And then you need to communicate those to people. And you need to set an example yourself. You need to lead by this example, because people will do what you do and they will see what you do. And the message and the communication and the behavior need to be aligned. And that's how you start it. Of course, there are some people who will not fit. You need to identify them as soon as possible. You need to recruit people that have already a better fit from the beginning. And in my opinion, one way to describe one aspect of an entrepreneurial culture is to talk about high performance, but also high safety. And what does that mean? It means that we have a high tolerance for failure, but we have no tolerance for incompetence.
Right. So experimentation is okay as long as you learn from it.
Yeah. And it's okay to fail, which means that you have a high trust environment. It's okay to say that, hey, this experiment we started didn't work. Or even that I failed in doing that. It's safe to say that. It's safe to stop the project early. It's safe to help others learn from my mistakes. but it's an environment where you know that you have to learn, you have to have the respect of others through your own competencies, and you want to respect the others for their competencies. You don't tolerate a leader who people feel is just a figurehead.
Yep.
Without deep competence.
And we've been talking and thinking a lot, how could organizations help more, support more their entrepreneurs? Because in some ways I feel we actually have hard evidence that there are wonderful entrepreneurial people in large Finnish organizations. Mm-hmm. We've established this as a fact. But we also have a feeling that they could do much more. They could be more courageous, and we could experiment more. We could be, quote unquote, more entrepreneurial if they were allowed to and if they were supported. Mm-hmm. So how could we support them more?
Well, again, it starts from us deciding that we want to encourage the kind of behavior that we associate with entrepreneurship. So, for example, high tolerance for failure is an example.
The first one came to my mind as well.
Yeah. So it's one of those sort of cultural characteristics of an organization that wants to support entrepreneurial behavior. But there are others as well, including, for example, one thing that I personally feel is very important for you to be successful, and that is that there's such a platform of trust that it is easy to share bad news. Mm. Because if you can't do that, then this high performance culture becomes almost impossible.
Absolutely.
Learning slows down.
Yep.
Negative surprises happen more and more often. So in Nokia, we have 12 cultural characteristics that we have defined that we want to sort of nurture. And that's our way of starting the cultural development in the right direction. You could define your own, or you could just say that I really respect when we have people who can say that I know what I want to do. If I'm the head of HR, I have a vision for how I want to run HR, how I want to drive the culture in the company, how I want to compensate people, how I want to align everybody. I know I can do this. And I'm doing these and these things every day. And that is already quite a long step towards this person behaving like an entrepreneur and also feeling fulfillment, because he or she has this vision and is working every day to reach that vision. And that provides motivation and a sense of fulfillment.